Um, he had about a bullet in the back of his head or been in his back, which I would have welcomed that if I'd have been in the same position, because that's the end of your punishment.
Did you lose any friends on that march?
Plenty of them, plenty of them.
About how far did the march go, stretch out to?
I'm not sure how, whether it's 70 or 80 miles or something like that. I'm not sure. It's been a lot written about that, but I'm not sure. I've read a lot about it. It started maybe 65, 70 or 80 miles, something like that.
At the close of the march, where were you taken to prison camp?
O'Donnell, Camp O'Donnell. At San Fernando, they see the railroad tracks in Philippines were narrow gauge. I'm not sure you all know what that means. We have the wide gauge tracks here, and the gauge, so they were much closer. Only they had, and their cars were smaller. So they, from Camp O'Donnell, San Fernando, they jammed us in boxcars of steel and closed the doors. Men in there just jammed in, no way, just room to stand, no room to stand. And I was lucky enough to be by the door where I could stick my face in the crack and breathe. Then from there they took us on up to a place called Camp O'Donnell. Now that's where more Filipinos died there than Americans, because we had a little reserve left in us that we could withstand some of the diseases that picked up coming out of Bataan. But there's where I had my worst sickness. I had malaria. Malaria can drive you out of your mind. You don't know where you are day after day. But anyway, from O'Donnell, we went to Camp Cabana to 1, which is about 60 miles near there. And that's where I stayed for about a year and a half. It took me a full year to get over that march out of Bataan. Although I wasn't shot or bayoneted or anything, you kicked and knocked around enough to realize that you're lucky to be alive one day to the next. And food on the march was a premium. They didn't give us anything to eat coming out. If it hadn't been for sugar cane, I probably would have died, because I ate sugar cane. If you've ever seen sugar cane growing in the fields.
Tell about the Philippine lady giving you the food.
Let me wait on that a minute. But anyway, what she's referring to, we were coming one night, it's sort of night, late in the evening, and when the Filipinos wanted to attract your attention, they made a noise like and I heard that. And somebody grabbed me by the arm, put something in my hand, and it was warm. It was rice and a piece of chicken rolled up in banana leaf. Food. So that's one of the things, that made me want to hang in there, so to speak. But that's the only thing that I got to eat coming out of there was that. And that same night we stayed, that's the only time we stayed overnight in a place. I saw this happen. They said no fires, don't build a fire. And this Filipino built a little fire to cook him a little something. This Jap walked up behind him, put his foot in his back, kicked him, and he fell forward, took his bayonet, jammed right down through his back, pulled his bayonet out, took the guy's shirt tail, and cleaned his bayonet off, and turned around and walked away. Now that's some of the things that we ran into that you'll never forget. But like I say, I was pretty lucky. Wasn't beat up bad, knocked down, knocked out time or two, but kept going.
Did at any time did the Japanese allow any sort of provisions or rations from the Red Cross?
The only Red Cross that I received was up in Japan in 1944. We got a little Red Cross package, and it had been ransacked. There wasn't the Japanese commander in this camp had his right arm off. He'd been in a battle up in China, and they'd treated him pretty rough, and he stayed drunk all the time. So they went through our packages and took out all the raisins. Wasn't one raisin in our package, you know, which we always, little packages, you know, we always had little packages of raisins. So he was, to compensate for that, he said he was going to give us a treat. We had 3 stoves in this building, pot-bellied stoves, and he gave us 3 pieces of wood for each stove for Christmas 1944. That was his way of treating us. Now you can imagine what kind of treat that was. And if we had ended up building one covered with snow, we'd froze to death anyway.
How did the women who were with you get treated?
No women with us. No women with us. They were separate. And I just got through reading a book there of a woman that was at Santa Tomas at the University of Philippines. She was interned there, and I just finished reading the book. Read it the second time. But I don't know about how they treated those. I know nothing about that.
When did you know the war was over?
Well, I guess about, we went, and when we went to Japan, went aboard the ship, my 25th birthday, 1944, in Manila Bay. And it took us about 11 days to get to Moji, Japan, where we were. And we worked in a steel mill, shoveling, they call it gendo, this mixture of coal, coke, and all that other stuff, you know, iron ore, shoveling it into these blazing hot furnaces. When we really were treated better in Japan, and we got a little more to eat, but we wasn't beat and banged around because there's one man there, one Japanese soldier, Master Sergeant wouldn't allow that. So to get back to when the war was over, the British was in one end of the barracks where we were, and they worked at a different steel mill. So we had gone to work one morning, and they said, "What are you guys doing out here? The war's over." That was about the 15th of August, 1945. Maybe a little earlier than that. So we just set the building on fire and left. Burn it down. And so a day or two later, a plane came in there, and the guy that was with the pilot, he was a master sergeant from Harlan, Kentucky. And he'd had a little sake to drink. And our company commander, who was a lieutenant commander in the Navy, had been in solitary confinement for 18 months as American, and he was about half batty, which all of us were. And the Japanese kept telling us we didn't have any food much. So the morning that the war was over, here they drive in there a big old steer